Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Anthony Hore, professional graphic designer and illustrator. Anthony's first game of many, The Pet Cemetery, is currently on Kickstarter. He's passionate about game design and truly believes a well-made game is good for the soul. I couldn't agree more. Anthony, welcome to the Binge. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm great. I'm really good. I'm really excited about chatting today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So you've got this game called The Pet Cemetery. No affiliation with the book, I'm assuming, right?
It's really kind of funny how often that comes up. Everyone's like, "Are you going to talk to Stephen King?" And I'm like, "Do you know what? We did our due diligence. We asked around. We got some advice, and we made sure that it's not spelled the same, and we're not at all affiliated, so we're fine."
Awesome.
So don't make me put out a board game anytime soon. I mean, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I guess. Well, hey, having that kind of endorsement on there would be kind of cool too. But hey, you know what? First, let me just say congratulations. So I ran the numbers about an hour ago. I'm sure this has changed in the last 10 minutes, but as of an hour ago, you were at 125 backers.
Mm-hmm.
You're at $7,434 of your $10,000 goal, and you still had 27 days to go. I mean,
yeah. It's been an exciting first 3 days. So this is the first time I've done a Kickstarter, and I've done lots of research, knowing that the first couple of days were super important. But to kind of get to that almost 75% in the first 3 days is really exciting. So it makes me confident that we're going to achieve and get across the line.
Yeah, the math would say you're going to cross the line. I don't think there's any doubt about that at this point. I think it's more a question of how far you will pass that line, right? And the stretch goals, which stretch goals are you going to end up hitting, and how much you can kind of adjust this game as you go. So why don't you start by just walking us through this game? So it's called The Pet Cemetery. What kind of game is it? How do people play it? Give us the gist.
Yeah, so The Pet Cemetery, it's a super fast-paced race-style game, really. So you're going to be on a board, a crypt within a cemetery board, racing against your friends to essentially get to the finish line first. So the premise really is that there's a professor called Professor Isker. She's right there. She's really like she's lost her tabby, her wonderful pet in a pickup truck accident one day. And so she's kind of gone a little bit crazy, and she's in the cemetery trying to find the best way to bring her cat back to life. As all kind of experiments in bringing anything back to life kind of would go wrong, there's a bunch of village pets that are popping up and causing a bit of mayhem. So as a player, you've been asked to go to the cemetery by the mayor of the town to head on out and see if you can be the first person to kind of stop her and arrest the professor.
Is it co-op, or is it you're actually competing against other people then?
It's completely competitive. So every player will have a different character card, which is a different character ability, and you'll be racing really. So the idea is to be the first person to find a set of handcuffs in the deck, and then cross the finish line at the end. So we really wanted to make a game that was very competitive and very fast paced, but also kind of creates a lot of excitement. So there's a lot of take that kind of attitude where if there's someone at the lead, you're trying to outwit them or kind of put monsters in their path. And then once you get the lead, you're trying to make sure that no one does that to you. And so it can kind of, there's a lot of pushing forward and pulling backwards during the game.
And how long does this game take to play? What's the length of time typically?
So it's sitting around 30 minutes for a 4-player game.
Okay, that's pretty quick.
It's pretty quick, and it can be a lot faster. So in a 2-player version, it can go a lot faster because there's a bit more board to maneuver around. But the more players there are, the more people there are to try to get past. And there's also more monsters that spawn as there are more players on the board.
So, and some of these powers, so each of these different characters have powers. What are some of the things that one character can do that another character can't do? What are some of these kind of upgrades that these people get?
Yeah, so there's some really fun ones. So the main premise of the game, you have to get a set of handcuffs in order to
Arrest, I guess, the doctor. Is that what the goal is? Yeah.
yeah, arrest the professor at the end. But we have like one of the characters is the sheriff, so she doesn't need a set of handcuffs.
Okay.
She just needs to get a gun or a weapon card and get to the end. We have someone like the speedster. He can move diagonally, which is quite unique. So all the characters can only really move forward or backward one space at a time. So at one point he can really jump diagonally. We have the thief there who gets to steal cards from everyone's hands. And then we have like the cheat who is an interesting character in terms that he can take a couple of turns during the game. So it allows him to really cheat his way through the game a little bit.
So these cards are randomly assigned at the beginning of the game, right? You're not actually choosing your characters?
Yeah, so the idea would be you shuffle those characters, you divvy them out. We've played quite a few rounds with different friends, and I've got some friends who have particular favorites, and so they'll try to get that character. But yeah, the idea is that it's always random, so that each time you have a slightly different strategic advantage over everyone else.
Now, two of the things I thought were really cool when I was watching the playthroughs on this. One was the fact that these standees they're not cardboard, like they're printed plastic or something like this, right?
Yeah, so they're going to be acrylic, and so we just need to update the visuals here. But all standees are going to be acrylic, which is really nice. So they have really good durability, and they'll play really nicely. You can see some of them there.
Yeah.
And so they're. I think it's just as much as we can increase that. I suppose the quality of the game,
sure,
better it'll play.
Yeah, I think that's neat because I mean, when you classically look at like standees, especially the ones that are made of cardboard, they get banged up pretty quick, and then they're kind of flopping on the board, and maybe they stay in their base, maybe they don't. So I think it's great you guys put that attention to detail to make sure that although there are standees, that they're high quality and they're going to last throughout the hundreds of hours of play I'm sure people will do. The other thing I wanted to point out was as interesting this board. I'm not sure I've kind of seen it exactly like this, but I'll describe for people who are listening to the podcast is the board is made up of kind of like three squares. So you got three boards you're putting together to make one long rectangular board. The two end ones are kind of standard. And then you've got three different interchangeable middle boards that can kind of change what this looks like. So every time you're playing, it's kind of a bit different, right? It's not always the same kind of cemetery. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's the exact idea was that we wanted to make sure that there's lots of variety and lots of, so every time you play, there's something slightly different. And so I suppose I was inspired by quite a few different larger games that do this.
Sure.
But yeah, I like the idea of having these different, almost like an easy, a medium, and a hard version of the game.
Right. Okay.
And creating, I think the boards were the best way to do that. So the one, when people go to the Kickstarter page, they can see it's really showing the easy version.
Yeah.
But I also liked that as part of the stretch goals, one of them is to create more boards, and that even down the line, we could kind of encourage, some of our backers to potentially design their own boards with these different tiles to create, there's really an endless variety of ways of presenting this board.
Are they dual-sided? Like, is it like you flip them? Is that how that works? Or
yeah. So currently it's just going to be the middle board. So there's going to be three middle boards. So there's essentially 6 different variations. But if it keeps going well, and I'm super encouraged, I don't see why we can't just print more.
There's another stretch goals. Maybe you have the starting and the ending board be reversible as well. So maybe you've got a different start and a different end, which gives you more combinations and permutations. It's a pretty cool game. I got the artwork is what really kind of pulled me in, and what connected the two of us when I saw this game. I said, "Oh gosh, I want to really interview Anthony and just learn a little bit more about this game." So you're the designer of the game. So you've created the actual game design, but also have done the artwork. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I suppose there's a lot to bite off for a first-time game designer, but I am like in my day job, I am a designer, and I trained as an illustrator. So part of my degree, I did a lot of illustration, and I've illustrated a lot in my own time in the past. So it was just I think a really good connection of skills, and it was a chance for me to kind of flex a little bit and have some fun, and create these really fun characters, and these really I think the pets are the thing that I love the most at the moment. They're super fun and cute. Mm-hmm. but yeah, I think I was very lucky in that regard that I was able to, that I've got the skills that I can kind of put forward and utilize, especially for this first ever board game design.
You've got kind of the triumvirate. You got the illustration part. So actually being able to, I talked to Sarah Keel about this a few weeks back, and a lot of people get confused between a graphic artist and an illustrator, right? So the illustrator is the person who comes up with the artwork. Graphic artist is the person that actually lays it out into like the cards and different elements and so forth. So having both as a skill set is fantastic, right? For efficiency. And then being a game designer on top of that, I mean, you're kind of a one-man show. That's pretty cool that you're lucky, quite frankly, to have all three of those skill sets in one person, right?
Very, very lucky. And I like, I've got so many good friends who are amazing. Like we play a lot of games, and I've got a couple of friends who are also designing games at the moment. But being able to execute on it, I think has been really helpful. And having 10 years of design experience means that I was able to kind of execute in I suppose in a much more professional capacity, and kind of put some really strong guidelines and timelines together for myself and hold myself accountable.
So what were you doing up to this point? So at what point did you kind of get into the whole, board game design and interest in board games? Where did that start?
I suppose it started from playing board games, from years and years of playing board games. So the Pet Cemetary really started about 4 years ago. I suppose the initial idea. Wow. I mean, that's also like 2 years of just mulling it over and like having some initial prototypes, and also being like keep pushing off when I should launch it because I was afraid of Kickstarter and all those kind of jazz. So I think it's years of playing board games, and then I wanted to really challenge myself. I wanted to put something out there, succeed or fail. I thought it'd be really fun to build and design a board game and get my friends involved and see what we can kind of do. And so that's kind of where it started from, and then it just became this big rolling mess of 1,000 different pieces and of kind of building it out. And so yeah, it's been really, really exciting and really challenging.
Has it been a big learning curve for you? Like, has there been a lot to kind of learn along the way, or?
Crazy amounts. I think some of the biggest things to learn beyond like the technical things, like not like needing to know how to market and how to talk to people, or needing to understand how Kickstarter works, or even building out components and test pieces. The biggest learning for me has really been how to separate, I suppose, myself from the game to a degree, because as soon as you put it out into the world, as soon as you give it to reviewers or people to test play, you're going to get feedback, and there's going to be people who really
crap all over it.
Yeah, but people, like, most of the time people are super amazing, but it's interesting when people are just like, oh, I just don't like that character. And I was like, okay, what can I do better? And they're like, oh, well, I just didn't like it. I was like, cool, thanks.
Yeah, it's I was talking to I think it was Mike Bruner and I were chatting about this. It's feedback is a gift. It really is. So, if people give you feedback and they're willing to put their time into giving you feedback, take it. It is a gift. And, maybe there's some gold in there, right? Maybe there's something you can adjust or that's going to make it better. And you know what? You don't have to take the feedback. So it's free to receive, and you don't necessarily have to use it, right? So, the key is to make sure that you're currently encouraging people to give you feedback, because it's important to get feedback on your game. You can get too close to your own creation, where ultimately the backers are the ones that are the voice. They're the ones that decide whether that game is going to be successful or not whether you like the game or not. It's whether they like the game, right? So it is important to get that feedback, but you will have people out there that will either be troll-like or give you feedback that's not necessarily constructive, right? So in those cases, you just kind of say, thank you, appreciate the feedback. Thank you for putting the time in to actually give me the feedback. And then you kind of just park it to the side and try to focus on the things that you can actually do something about. So the constructive stuff, right? So, I think that's great. And so when I was going through the campaign, let's talk a little bit about how the actual campaign itself has come together. So you've got, I believe, Quartermaster Logistics is who you've kind of chosen out of the States to do your fulfillment for you?
Yeah. So at the moment, they're the guys that we're going to be talking to for the States mainly, yeah.
Okay. And then how are you doing your fulfillment for other parts of the world?
So we have another supplier here up in Canada, and they're going to be fulfilling Canada, and they also have a wider reach into Australia and New Zealand and the UK.
So who's that? Is that D6 or is that?
Oh, I have completely blanked them.
That's okay. You can put in the comments afterwards. And then,
Yeah.
so they're covering off Canada and Australia. And then for the UK, are you using a different group or how are you in the UK?
These guys as well. So they've been really good. They've got like a wider reach, which I really like. And so it's important, especially because I'm from New Zealand, that I kind of support and I can get games down there in a like a timely and not too cost prohibitive fashion. So these guys, they had some really good costs. And so it's about the same to ship it there as it is to ship to the UK, which is really nice.
Wow. And then what about, is there any kind of like pledge manager you have on the back end that you're going to work with, or how are you going to manage kind of the pledges on the back? Are you going to do your own survey? Are you going to have like one of these plugin ones or?
Yeah, at the moment we're going to be doing a plugin, just because we're a bit smaller, which is nice. We're definitely not going up against thousands of backers. So I'm hoping that depending on how the project goes and how the campaign goes, we'll just be able to get one of those nice CrowdX plugins and do some good Q&A at the end and help make sure that we're really kind of clear with all the pledges and get it out, get the game out to people really well.
And for the people that are listening, there's different ways you can go about it in Kickstarter, right? So there's either you can do a survey on your own. So when your campaign concludes, you can put out a survey, get the addresses, ask whatever polling questions you want, and then go and fulfill and act upon it. But there are third party pledge managers, for lack of a better word. There's one actually called Pledge Manager. There's another one called CrowdX. We actually interviewed Chandler on this podcast as well. Backer Kit. There's several great ones out there. Is doing your research and find the right one for you. But definitely for your first time in, it's a bit of a beast, right? Collecting all the data, and the more pledgers you have, the more complicated that gets, especially if you have different iterations and permutations of your actual pledge levels, right? So that's cool. So you guys have kind of arranged that and got that sorted out. And then have you been using any kind of like social boosting at all? Like have you been doing like a green inbox or any of these guys where they...
Yeah, a little bit. So we've mainly been sitting on Facebook, doing a lot of Facebook ads.
So you're doing them yourselves? Yeah.
Doing that ourselves, yeah, which is, again, a really kind of fun learning curve.
Sure.
And then we've, just as of this morning, we've had a few people reach out to ask, but it's that balancing act because we're self-published. I knew that I was going to have to put a decent amount of money up front, but it's just really managing that marketing budget at the moment and making sure that we don't just kind of start throwing money here, there, and everywhere if it's not going to be super helpful.
So one thing that I really noticed and I really appreciated, in going through the page, and it's on your Facebook page as well. On day one, when you launched this campaign, the first thing you did was you said, hey, if you're new to Kickstarter, this is how it works, and this is how you can, how the flow of information is going to go. Mm-hmm. And you don't see that enough. I know Jamie Stegmaier, he talks about it in his book as well, about the importance of not assuming everybody knows what Kickstarter is, not assuming that everybody knows how to pledge. I've run into this myself in previous campaigns where you assume that the knowledge is ubiquitous, but it's not, right? There's a lot of people that are like, oh, I really want to back you. I just don't really understand how this whole thing works. So I thought that was pretty cool that you did that as your first kind of post on launch day, was to say, hey, this is what Kickstarter is. This is how it works. And this is what you can expect. For anybody listening to this podcast who think about doing their own campaign, do me a favor, go to the Pet Cemetary Kickstarter page, copy and paste this into like a Word document somewhere, what Anthony has written, and put it, translate into your own words. And then when you do your campaign, do the exact same thing. Cause I thought that was a great way to kind of kick it off at the beginning. So congratulations on that. That was awesome.
Yeah, I think it's so valuable. That was a quick lesson from really talking to my mum. And I think you're always going to have like family wanting to support you, and they're always going to not understand what's happening. So I talked her through it, and she still didn't quite get it. And I just had one of those moments where I thought, if she doesn't get it, maybe other people won't like as first timers won't quite understand, because she's like, oh, so I'm buying the game. I'm like, well, you're not buying the game. You're kind of pledging to help out. And if we reach it, then you get the game.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really, I think that it's important to educate and help people understand so they know what they're getting into. And also being really thankful. Like day one, I made sure that the first thing I was doing was thanking everyone who's been listening to me like scream at them on Facebook for the last month or two.
Sure.
And everyone who's been like pushing my content and been really friendly and really helpful. And so, you know, it's because of the backers that we're doing so well. And you know, there's some really great big fans out there. So it's important to be thankful to them.
What's the best piece of feedback do you think you've received so far as part of this journey of bringing this game together, as you've been either, you know, play testing with different people or even backers giving feedback? What would you say is kind of the best piece of feedback you've had so far?
Oh, the best piece of feedback. That would be a hard one. I think there's lots of little pieces here and there. I think the clarity of information is always the most important. There have been so many times, I think, especially in like the rule book, writing the rules, where because I've been so in the game for so long, I have all these natural assumptions that I can put. I'm like, oh, well, if you play that card, then, you know, this will happen. And just assuming that other people would know that has been wrong, which is good to learn. But yeah, so the more people I had playtest, the more information that was required, the more detail you need to give. And that's been really super helpful to make it really clear. And even like yesterday, I picked up one of the test prints from a local test player with some great feedback. And so there are going to be some more minor edits and some
Nice.
That 4-page rule book might become a 6-pager once we finish at the end.
Well, Joe Slack, we had him on the podcast as well. He's from the board game design course. He talks in his book, and if anybody hasn't read the book, you should. It's a great book, especially if you're, you know, a new board game designer. He talks about the importance of blind playtesting. So there's playtesting, but then there's blind playtesting, which is you just hand the game over to someone with the instructions and you let them just have at it. It is amazing what will come out of that. You will be shocked. The things that you didn't even think or you assumed that was common knowledge, but guess what? It was in your head. It wasn't actually in the rule book. So I think that's pretty cool to do that kind of testing. I also noticed that you had on Tabletop Simulator, you guys use Tabletop Simulator for a lot of virtual play testing. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you set that up and how that worked for you?
Yeah, so this was just spending lots of time on different threads and different boards and on Reddit a lot and on Board Game Geek and talking to people and asking, you know, what are some good ways of getting people excited about the game. And then again, I was lucky that I was reached out by a designer who designs for Tabletop Simulator, and he said, if you give me the assets, I'll build it for you.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really cool. And so he's just like, just thank me. And you know, so his name's going to be on the little booklet for everyone. And so he took me through how to get it live, and it was been like super helpful. And so we've now had people play on it. And I think you always have to balance balance up, I think, how much you give. And so it's very much a test version. There's only like 6 players and there's some limits to it, but it's a good way of, I think, if people get a chance to test play it without any commitment, they can be like, yeah, I enjoy this game, or no, I don't. And that's kind of what you want, because you don't want backers who don't like the game. You want backers who love the game.
Yeah, exactly. And then I noticed it's a 2 to 6 player version. Is there a solo version in the future, perhaps, for this game? Is there a...
Perhaps, yeah. We've actually, I was talking to one of our test players recently, blind test players, and they had a great idea about potentially having an expandable deck that is where the professor, if you were to play either by yourself or even a 2-player, the professor, you just keep flipping these cards every turn. So you would have a turn and then you just flip a random card and something random would happen. So it could be really interesting.
Maybe you could be the professor. So maybe the solo version, you're the professor and you're trying to keep all these players from getting you, eh?
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool.
That'd be fun.
So what would you say is some of the biggest learnings you've had in putting this Kickstarter campaign together? What are some things where you're like, wow, I really wish I knew that before I started?
I think it's just the time commitment is always going to be a big factor. I took this week off being launch week, and I thought, you know, there are definitely down times, but there's a lot of me kind of wandering the internet, talking to people and answering questions, and being really active. And I think just the more active you can be, the more you communicate with potential new backers, the more trust you can build, the more confidence you can build, and then potentially the more backers you can kind of convert over. And especially for a first time board game designer and developer, it's you're completely unknown. And so as a backer of other board games, I could totally understand being like, oh, they've never done this before. How can you be sure that you're going to get what you expect? And so just making sure that you can kind of build as much of that, have as many conversations as you can, talk to as many people as you can, I think is really important.
It always seems easier than it actually is. It is an insane amount of work, right?
It looks so easy from the outside. Like, I think you look at the success of some big board games like Gloomhaven and those guys, and I get they're a company.
Yeah.
Even the smaller successes of like some other board games. Like I backed the Good Glory last year, it was another, I think he was out of Alberta.
Yep.
And it looked really great. And from the outset, I was like, yeah, cool. And then when I was talking to him about it, he was like, he's like, prepare to not sleep if you're going to be working full time. So it is what it is. And so I think that's really valuable. I think for people, if you decide to design your own game, it's a passion project, and you're going to have to keep that fire burning.
Yeah, exactly. What came first? Is the story or the theme of the Pet Cemetery, or the actual mechanics of how the game worked?
Definitely the mechanics. For me, it was really important that the game play functioned properly, and that the way that you move through and the way you can strategize for the game made sense. And then we went through like a couple of different iterations of themes. I don't know. At all times, there was going to be something dead involved. At one point, there were zombies, and there was a necromancer. But then we I think, after playing it a few times, wanted to kind of pull it back into something slightly more family friendly, so that it's not so kind of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And something that I think I was really cognizant of people like my family or my partner's family, and being like, well, how do we make sure that we can design a game for non-game people that looks fun and is really kind of approachable.
And certainly at 30 minutes, I mean, that's a great primer game for game night. So if you're playing game night with friends and, you want something to play while you're waiting for people to show up, or maybe at the end of the night when people have left and there's only a few people left hanging around, those are I love those kind of games where you've got, 30, 40 minutes and you're cranking through a game. And then also allows you to bring in people as kind of like a gateway, entrance into the category as a whole. Get them to play, these games that are shorter, fun, not too heavy, but still enjoyable. What's next on the plate for you? So after Pet Cemetery is done, which it's not done yet, you still got another month to go. And again, congratulations. You're going to hit your goal. There's no doubt about that. But once you're done Pet Cemetery, do you have other games kind of as part of the roster, or have you already started on your next game, or kind of what's next on the horizon?
Yeah, it's I think it's always, and from what I understand, it's an avalanche for every designer. You start one, and then before you know it, you've got 4 others on the go. So I'm working with a friend on another. It's a card game, it's a little bit more, I suppose, like drinking card game style, where it's a bit more casual with a bunch of friends and very quick and easy. And then we've got like 2 other concepts in development after that as well. So, there could be some big things on the horizon.
That's awesome. I see Richard Mack in the lobby here saying good luck on the home stretch. He backed and tweeted, and he hopes that you go way beyond your targets. So
amazing. Thank you so much.
You got people that are listening and encouraging. So I want to wish you all the best in this game. I think it looks awesome. And I have no doubt that you're going to crush your target. It's only the beginning, and the addiction has just started, my friends. So brace yourself.
Okay. Thank you so much for today.
Hey, no worries. Thanks again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. You take care. Cheers.